Welcome to the latest episode of the B Movie Club. I'm your host, Kevin. This week we're going to be discussing the 1988 comedy classic, Heathers, starring Christian Slater and Winona Ryder. For those of you joining us for the first time, the B Movie Club is like a book club, where early in the week I'll post on Twitter and Facebook what movie we'll be doing. You can check it out. You can post your comments, your questions, your favorite scenes. And we'll talk about it on the show. So, Heathers. Basically, it's a black comedy that deals with like kind of the pressures of high school life in kind of a totally different and unusual way. In the story, the most powerful clique in school consists of these three mean girls who are all named Heather. The fourth member of their team is Veronica, who's played by Winona Ryder. And she was kind of somebody who had at one point been kind of a nerd and blossomed into being part of this clique. But so she still had a soul, she still had a conscience, but she was struggling to be, part of this clique, basically, because they're so mean. These are like her friends. Meanwhile, the new kid comes to school, Christian Slater, JD, who's kind of a bad boy, and they're instantly attracted to each other. They hit it off, and basically he is kind of I don't want to say he's a psycho, but he's a psychopath. He basically starts getting Veronica to do these bad things to the Heathers. One by one they're biting the dust, and the cool kids are on the run. I don't want to give away too much. But it has a lot to do with faking suicides. There you go. That hilarious topic. Anyway, it is hysterical in a totally dark and twisted way. I'm not going to lie. One of my favorite movies from back in the day, because it does kind of deal with high school in a way that hadn't been done up to that point. I mean, the big high school movies prior to this were like 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, and this was striving to be like the opposite of that. So much so that they actually hired teenagers to play the roles of the high school students. Shocking, I know. Usually they had 35-year-olds in there. Interestingly enough, Shannon Doherty, who's also in this, playing one of the Heathers, 10 years later, went on to play another high school student. So there you go. This script was written and circulated like in 86 or 87. And everybody loved the script, but they were like, there's no way this movie can ever be made because it's too dark. No one wants to see high school kids represented this way. And finally, another kind of new director picked it up. And he went ahead and he became the champion for this movie and got New World Pictures, who later went out of business, to make this movie. It's funny because the writer, the author of this originally was holding out because he thought Stanley Kubrick would be the one, because he felt this was like, this is just right up his alley. I mean, Stanley Kubrick had done like The Last Word and, all of his movies up to this point, Dr. Strangelove and 2001: Space Odyssey, so on and so forth. So even though he's a first-time writer, he just assumed, oh yeah, Stanley Kubrick will be banging down my door to get this. He eventually decided to go with this other director, Michael Lehman. Sadly enough, both of them went on to make Hudson Hawk a few years later, so maybe they should have quit while they were ahead. Casting. They originally wanted Jennifer Connelly to play Winona Ryder's role, and they couldn't get her, so they went with Winona Ryder, who was kind of an unknown. She'd done Beetlejuice up to this point. And I know Heather Graham had auditioned to be another one of the Heathers. But her mom read the script and said, no way. No way. In fact, Winona Ryder's agent basically got down on her hands and knees and begged her not to do this script. She's like, you're a relatively new actress. You'll never work in this town again if you do this movie. And of course, when the movie came out, they didn't know how to publicize it, because it's not a true comedy. It's not like 16 Candles or one of those movies. But it's not like a horror movie either. In some ads, they pushed it like it was a horror movie. In Europe, they didn't call it Heathers. They called it Lethal Attraction. They called it Lethal Attraction, which it's a good title, okay, but it's not Heathers. I think Heathers obviously was perfect for what they wanted to do. Wasn't a big hit, as you might imagine, because it just seems like such a strange type of thing to do. They actually had to rewrite extensively and reshoot the ending of the movie. I don't want to give anything away, but originally the ending had a bomb going off in the school and all the high school students are killed. And the next scene is them up in heaven, basically at a heavenly prom where everybody's getting along and all the nerds and the popular people are all, walking hand in hand and everybody's happy. So needless to say, they went for a slightly different ending. Funny thing is that when this movie came out, Winona Ryder had actually been cast in something else, and either the company or the director or whomever, producers, basically fired her, basically saying, I don't want to work with anybody who would make a movie like that. So there was a little bit of backlash. Some other interesting facts. This was about the time when people stopped saying rad. There was kind of a backlash towards rad, like, I don't want to say rad anymore. So the author basically took it upon himself to kind of rewrite and make up his own slang. So if you watch this movie, they're constantly like saying their own kind of crazy slang. It's like, we're going to a party, it's going to be very. As if that explains it. It's very. Like this show is very, let me tell you. Another thing, which I found out fairly recently, is the actress who plays the main mean Heather Chandler. At one point she turns to Shannon Doherty and says, "Did you have a brain tumor for breakfast?" And she later went on to die of a brain tumor, ironically. And one of the actors in the movie is praying, saying like, I don't think I can handle suicide. He actually went on to commit suicide years later. So there's kind of a sobering twist, years later. Anywho, if you have not seen it, I highly, highly recommend it. It's not for everybody. Again, it's very dark, but it is a comedy after all. It is streaming instantly on Netflix. It got a 95% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, so that's good. Next week, I posted on Facebook another question. I said, I usually, about this time I'll do a horror movie. What are some horror suggestions? And subscriber Ray came on and suggested a couple different things, and I'm gonna agree with him. We're gonna do the horror classic, The Howling, about werewolves. Good times. I guess it's called The Howling. It's not going to be about vampires. I mean, I guess it could be howling vampires. I don't know. Anyway, thank you for joining us. You know that I end every episode with a totally out of context quote from the movie, and here it is. Does this answer your question? Oh, the humanity. Very good. Anywho, thank you for joining us. Next week will be The Howling. Send in those comments and questions to Facebook, YouTube, on Twitter at KD9575. And we'll see you next week. Be well.